Mexico's too Mexican. And I don't like that.
I mean, some teenagers do drugs, some teenagers do alcohol. She's just moving around.
I told my parents, okay, I'm getting married. They're like, isn't he gonna ask for your hand? And I was like, who is he gonna ask for my hand? He asks me.
Desgraciada.
Desgraciada. Who gives a shit about bubblegum if you can walk at 3 a.m. in the morning freely and nobody's gonna, you're safe. Unfortunately, the rest of the world does not work like Singapore.
Good morning on both of our sides, because luckily we're in the same time zone, Fatima, and welcome to Whereabouts Tales.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
I would like to make a small intro how we got in connection, because I find the story quite interesting. I'm always searching and digging deep in the Reddit's rabbit holes on different topic.
Yeah.
And I found a really, really interesting message on one of the expats communities that I am in Reddit, and it started with "Dear Singapore, I miss you." And I read through the whole story, through the whole message, and I said, "Oh, I need to talk to the person who wrote this message." And luckily, you replied, Fatima. But before we go to Singapore,
and before I start crying,
it's okay. The miss is still there. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for doing this to you. Please tell us where you are born, where you are originally coming from, Fatima.
So I was born in Mexico. So I am from Mexico City, but I don't really like to disclose that because I don't know. There's a lot of rivalry within Mexico between people from the north and the center and the south, and I guess everywhere in between. So I was born in Mexico City. My parents are from the north of the country, from one of the border states. So we border the US, and we're on the Pacific side. So it's north on the northwest. It's a state called Baja California.
I know it.
And so yeah, my parents are from a city called Mexicali, and then that's where they met. But after they got married, they moved to Mexico City, and that's where I was born. And I lived in, Mexico City and sort of the periphery until I was 7.
Okay, so you moved early outside of the country.
Well, no, I moved to the north of the country. We went back to our sort of our home state.
Mm-hmm.
So we went back to Baja California, to a small coastal town called Ensenada.
Sounds good. Sounds like a dream life to be in Mexico. Everyone is going there for holiday. I know it's always the demo version of the holiday, which is happening for everyone. But I want to ask you, Fatima, what raised your interest to move outside of Mexico?
I guess I don't know. I wanted to see different things. So, I lived in Mexico until I was 18. And when I finished high school, sort of finishing high school brought to me what I like to call my first existential crisis, because, well, the first sort of existential middle-age crisis when I was 18, because I I finished high school, and it coincided with me. Up until that point, I had been a national level athlete. So I was part of the Mexican national triathlon team, and I was racing internationally. And, my dream was to go to the Olympics, and that was kind of that was going to be my life. But that last year of high school, a couple of things came to a head. I started getting injured constantly, just constantly injured. And by that point, I wasn't living with my parents. I had moved away from the family home to be able to train with the national team. And the national team was back, around Mexico City. So I was living with some friends of my parents, and I went to high school, but I was training and sort of living my own life. I mean, I was responsible for myself. And I started getting injured, and I couldn't train anymore. And to be honest with you, I wasn't able to really, I didn't have the drive anymore, and I didn't really understand it. And high school finishes, I have to go back home because, I mean, I can't stay there. I'm enrolled at university. I'm going to study medicine, and I was, top of the class. I was kind of like the model student, the model teenager, everything perfect. And all of a sudden I thought, no, I can't do this. I can't do this. And most of my friends were taking a gap year, and I all of a sudden realized that I was 18, but I hadn't really had a teenage period. I mean, I had never been out and partying or nothing. For me, it was, 9 p.m. bedtime and, 5 a.m. wake up and go swimming, go running, what I eat, what I don't eat, my carb load and all this kind of stuff. I lived a really kind of regimented life, not because my parents were pushy, but because I pushed myself. I don't know. I was really a perfectionist. And it was at that moment when I thought, I can't go to university now. I need to take a gap year. I need to go somewhere else. And I was having a lot of trouble also adjusting to coming back to living with my parents. I mean, I had effectively been, since I was like 16 and a half, I had been living on my own, and all of a sudden I had my parents on top of me, and I was like, So I think I just went eeny meeny. Oh, I went on holiday with a friend. We went on this bus tour around Europe, and I was like, oh, Italy looks cute. Mom, I want to go to Italy. And my mom was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, yeah, it's great. I'll go there. And last minute, we managed to piece together this sort of gap year for me. And I went to Italy to study Italian. And once I was in Italy, I thought, I don't want to go back to Mexico. Mexico's too Mexican. And and I don't like that. Whatever that means. It's too Mexican. I don't like that. I like to explore. I like to be I guess there was an element of you could reinvent yourself. I mean, you can be anyone when you're abroad. You go back home and you have all this baggage of your family or your state or your city but when you're abroad, I mean, you can just be anything. And I liked that. And I liked that, the sort of the mix of people. So I developed some friendships, and a friend was going to go to university in London, and I thought, oh, I'll go with you. Let's go. I'll accompany you. And I did that, and when I arrived in the UK, I was like, oh, maybe I can study here. And for a day or 2 days, I started looking at brochures for universities. And I saw a university that looked nice, and I thought, oh, this is perfect for me. I'll go there. It sounds like a complete sort of superficial and very kind of clueless way of choosing life. I mean, but at that point, I was 19, it was just whatever. I mean, potato, whatever. This looks good. Why not? What's more to it? And so I told my parents that I was not going to go to medical school, and what was I going to
Oh.
study? Yeah. And I mean, to be honest with you, I think they thought I was crazy, and they were maybe indulging me for a bit, and they're like, okay, whatever.
I mean, some teenagers do drugs, some teenagers do alcohol. She's just moving around.
Yes, choosing universities because she likes the facade of the main building, and it's green, and yes, let's do this. And they're like, you're absolutely insane. What are you talking about? And I said, yeah. And I convinced them. I still don't know what I did to convince them, but I was like, yeah, I think they knew I was mature because I had lived on my own for a while already, and it had never been a source of trouble. So I guess there was an element of them trusting me, and I think there was also an element of them knowing that that's it. I mean, there's no discussion. I'm doing this.
But I
So
see. I'm sorry for interrupting you, Fatima. There are two things. I see a pattern quite often in my discussion with the experts. I see two things: living alone really early in life, which develops this wish of, you know what, it's okay. I like it. I don't want to. I don't want to go back to my parents' place. I don't like it. I can do whatever I want. Nobody's on my ass. No,
yeah.
that's the first thing. And second thing is the traveling that you do quite early in your life, because, like you said, you were traveling internationally for the competition, as far as I understood, right?
Yes, yes. So I was traveling. I mean, I went to Australia on my own. And I was, I think, 17.
Wow, so cool. I mean,
And
not really on your own with the team, right?
yes, yes. I mean, no, actually, I traveled because, again, this is where we like get into the nitty gritty of it. But yes, I mean, there was a team, but at the same time, it was all a little bit do it yourself, DIY,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So, and like, sadly, a lot of maybe things in Mexico is if you want to go to this competition, sometimes you can go. It's just a question of can you afford to go? You might
Oh,
have
okay.
qualified, you
Okay.
might, you might be really good. But in terms of, the funds available, there might be, out of, I don't know, 20 people who are eligible to go, maybe they have money to pay for one ticket, and the rest is, okay, maybe we'll give you food vouchers or whatever.
I come from Romania. It's the same.
Yes, 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 exactly. So in this case, yes, I was on my own
Mhm.
at 17, traveling, from Los Angeles to Sydney. And then I flew to Perth. So I was actually on the
On the
complete
other
other
side.
side of Australia. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I arrived, and okay, where do I take the taxi? What do I do? And I mean, I had been traveling before, even as a child, within the country. And I think being maybe so close to the US had maybe shown me, okay, this is Mexico and things are done this way here. And then you have the US, where even though I didn't live there, I would go frequently because it's a
Not
car
far
drive
away.
away.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at that time when I was growing up, that part of Mexico felt a little bit removed from the rest of the country.
Mm-hmm.
So, so there were things that you would need to go to the US because that was the nearest and biggest sort of center to get whatever you needed.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than traveling, inland to Mexico, which might be, a 3-hour plane away. So you
Oh,
would travel
okay.
and to get things. So there was this constant back and forth. And I guess that exposed me early on to different ways of living, of doing things.
A different kind of living for sure, not the Mexican typical style. You are too close to US and you had the influence from there then.
Yeah. And I guess another element is that, you have Mexican culture, which you could say is, it will have its own flavor within Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have what you would call the stereotypical Mexican culture, which is predominantly, it exists in the center of the country. The north is a little bit its own, it's a bit of a hybrid because it's always been kind of a bit far removed from the center of the country. So you have different traditions, you have different ways of doing things. There's always been, it's an immigrant part of the country, at least the Northwest, because it wasn't very populated. So you had people from within Mexico moving there, but also you had foreigners moving there. So yeah, it's a bit of a hybrid place, and I think that influenced me one way or another to maybe explore alternatives to that,
Mm-hmm.
which maybe was expected. I don't know.
But everything makes sense what you just said. Everything, because the influence from the north. It's interesting that you say the north is separated from the let's say from the rest of the country. Is there
Yeah.
because I know at least in the latest years, we have a lot of US guys moving close to the border in Mexico. At least that was the case. Was that the case back then as well?
Yes. You had retired Americans moving south to my state. But what I remember the most was definitely this. I would say it's a very permeable border, and it used to be permeable, since my grandparents' time. You would go, you would go to the US to buy things that maybe you couldn't find in our own state, which again, our own state was not considered a state. It was a territory for, a long period of time. And then you had, there's a important Chinese influence in my mom's hometown. There's a big Chinese community. So, for example, the town is called Mexicali. And what do you do in Mexicali on a weekend? You go and eat Chinese food. And there's tons of Chinese restaurants. And again, this Chinese food is from most of the, Chinese immigrants come from the south of China. So it's a Cantonese style food. Again, it's been, reshaped by a Mexican palate. But yeah, you go and eat Chinese food, and that's what you eat. And people are like, what are you talking about? Chinese? Yes, of course. You have Chinese food on the weekend. That's what you do.
I had two guests until now in my podcast that were from US, moved abroad, and I asked them, what do you miss the most from US? And everyone told me Mexican food. How can you eat in Mexico Chinese?
Yes, 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 yes. It's Chinese food. And then in my hometown, there is see, I swallow. You have it's a coastal town, it's a big fishing town. So you have a lot of fish and seafood, and fish tacos come from my hometown. They were developed there, and the special
Oh,
batter that they use comes from my hometown. And then, you had, I mean, there's tons of stories that maybe we can leave for
yeah,
another
yeah.
podcast, but we have, during Prohibition, there were casinos that were set up in my hometown and around. So you had a lot of Americans coming in, drinking in Mexico, gambling, and then going back north. And
Ah,
so
okay.
there's always been a lot of movement. I mean, when I was there this summer, we also saw this. I saw this celebration of the Japanese community in Mexico, in
So
my
interesting.
hometown.
So interesting.
So it's always, like I said, it's always been a land of immigrants. I mean, whether they be Mexican or now, you know, third, fifth generation
Hmm.
Mexican, but with a Japanese component or with a Russian component. I mean, you have this Russian families that moved close to my hometown, and they were some of the first ones that started the winemaking tradition. Or you go further south and you see this missions, religious missions that were founded in the 1700s. When this territory was really sort of being
It's
discovered.
extremely interesting. I didn't know that Mexico has such a huge history of immigration. I
Yeah,
had no idea. It's crazy.
we had there was a priest that came from what is it, Adriatic country, Croatia, and he founded in the 1700s a mission. He was a priest, and I mean, so anyway,
Cool.
we digress.
Yes, yeah, we digress. Honestly, I would like to go into that offer of yours and to make an episode to talk about the migration in Mexico in your area, because I think that's extremely interesting. I think nobody knows about that. At least this is
Yeah,
my feeling.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so let's go back to London, Fatima.
yeah,
You went to London. You said, okay, I like it here. I want to study here.
yeah.
Um, was the first impression of London already good?
Yeah, I mean, I just loved it. It was not Mexico. You could dress in whatever way you wanted and nobody cared. And I loved public transport because that was not, I mean, public transport, of course it existed in my
Talking
in
about
my hometown, but it wasn't as institutionalized. I mean, you had public transport in Mexico City or in the
hmm
big cities down south. In my hometown, I mean, you had
buses.
this buses, and they didn't even have a route, and they would stop wherever you wanted. But here you had the underground, and you had the double-decker buses, and you had the trains, and I didn't have to rely on a
So be
car.
happy.
Or
Enjoy the
yeah,
small things in life. Enjoy the
yeah,
small things in life.
I could walk everywhere, and I loved that. And yeah, to me it was, it was so novel and so freeing to an extent. Um so I said, yeah, I'm staying here. I convinced my parents, we did financial calculations. Um and they said, okay, I mean, you're going, but know that we might not be able to pay for your final year of university. And I said, yeah, that's fine. We'll figure it out. And I went, and I was, first year I needed to do like a remedial year, because the Mexican system and the English system, I mean, I guess they're compatible. I don't know if they're not compatible or they just wanted us to pay more, because as foreign students, it was very, very expensive. This was before university fees were introduced. So you had the fees for foreign students, and European students and local students did not have to pay that much. It was almost negligible. So my first year, I sort of this remedial year, I did it with tons of Japanese, Korean, Chinese, and what else did we have? Polish students. And yeah, Venezuelan, Argentinian. I loved it. I loved it. I enjoyed it so much, and it was great. It was great. Then starting my degree, what do I study? I didn't know. So again, it was one of these random choices to study European studies. I mean, talk about a useless degree. I mean, the UK left the EU after a couple of
Oh my God.
after about 10 years or so. But yeah, I did European studies. It was a mixture of languages and history and politics. I call it, the degree for the undecided, because you could do a little bit of everything. And that's what I ended up doing. And I had my English friends and my international friends, and yeah, I loved it. And I would invite myself to their countries, like, oh, can I visit you? I'm gonna go and visit you. Okay, when shall I go? And they're like, okay, this person who just like, so yeah, that was that. And I realized pretty quickly I didn't want to come back home.
But you finished university then?
Yeah, I finished university. At the end, my parents kind of, they weren't able to pay for my final year. So it was a mixture of me starting to work part-time and then, getting bits and bobs from all over to pay for my final year. And that final year, before my final year, I did a gap year. I did a gap year in Italy. Not a gap year, but they used to call it your Erasmus year, because it was a 4-year degree.
University, yeah.
Yeah, so I went to Rome and I worked at the Mexican embassy because, European studies, international relations, and yeah, I did an internship there. I was in the communications department, and I went to the World Food Program for a couple of sessions to, go with the Mexican representative. And yeah, it was great. Moving myself in Rome, taking the bus, metro. I don't know. I found
public transportation again.
Yes. I found it so, I don't know. I guess, yeah, coming from my little hometown, to me, this was, such an achievement. Like, I can orient myself anywhere. I come from this little town and I can do these things anywhere. And you soon realize you can do that anywhere in the world, right? Public transport or no public transport. I think there's a degree of self-reliance and independence that
sky's the limit.
Yeah, that you start to value, or you start to appreciate in yourself.
I have to say, I come also from a small village, not even a city, from a small village in Romania. And after my visit I was, I think, 2 times already in New York, but after the first time when I was there with my wife, we were there for 4 days for like a city break, first trip alone without a kid after he was born.
Yeah.
And when I came back, I talked with a friend and said, what did you enjoy the most? I think the metro. And he didn't understood. And now I think it makes sense. Like that possibility to okay, the metro in New York is a different world, of course,
Yes,
because
yes.
it's crazy by itself. But the fact that you could like be everywhere, like without needing everything, it was impressive for me. Even though I was fully grown up and it was 4 or 5 years ago, but still, it's impressive. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. I agree.
Okay, so London, then again in Italy, second time in Italy.
See, second time in Italy, yes, in Rome. Um, and then going back for my final year. At this point, by the end of the second year at university, I met the man that is now my husband, this Norwegian man that was very mysterious. It's not that it's not that he's mysterious, it's just that he's an introvert, right? So I would arrive with my sort of hi style, and I think it would be a little bit too much. But yeah, we became good friends. We we studied together, and then yeah, we started dating, and yeah, we got married on our final year of university.
Oh my god, how was that news for your parents?
Yeah, so I called them. I don't know. I I told my parents, okay, I'm getting married. They're like, isn't he gonna ask for your hand? And I was like, who is he gonna ask for my hand? He asked me. Why does he have to ask you? Like, what
You
are you talking
destroyed
about?
all the traditions and the habits.
Yes, yes, yes. I think that there was an element of that as well, that I maybe didn't really fit in with this maybe stereotypical gender roles,
Hmm.
or
Yeah.
ideas, not in any, not in any way that is
No, but
uh,
you come as well from a patriarchal society, which is mainly, I think it's, as far as I know, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it's mainly guided by religion, and you have the man who's the boss of the house, and he's the head, and the woman is there. Of course, I'm not saying that she doesn't have a job, but he's the deciding. He has to go to your father to ask for the hand and so on. So I think all these things.
I think maybe, I mean, I came from on my mom's side, very strong women, maybe out of necessity. My
That's
grandmother became
strange.
a widow when she was very young, and she had
Okay.
7 kids. And
Ooh.
so she became a very young widow. She never remarried, 7 kids, one of them disabled, and they had a travel agency. So my grandfather had set up the first travel agency in the country, not in the country, sorry, in the state. So it was the first travel agency in the state. And my grandmother kept it up, and it was the heyday of what did you call it? Like group travel, that you would get loads of people together, and then, okay, we're going to Europe, and
Mm-hmm.
or we're going to Hawaii or whatever, and the travel agent would go with you and accompany you, and be
Mm-hmm.
your
Mm-hmm.
travel guide. So so yeah, my grandmother kept that business, and then the whole family went into that business. And yeah, I mean, quite um strong personalities, I would
Mm-hmm.
say. And my dad was a fairly I don't know, liberal, philosophical, relaxed guy. I mean, I think he wasn't too hung up on gender stereotypes, or maybe
Okay,
he
that
wasn't too hung up on imposing that on me. Or maybe I don't know. I mean,
but that makes sense. What you are saying makes sense because that's why you decided to be different because you got that from home already.
yeah, maybe. I mean, again, I mean, my mom was she was for most of her life, at least when I was growing up, she was at home.
Mm-hmm.
And but I don't know. I just never believed that. I mean, I don't know. I always liked running, and I liked, playing rough sports, and I want to play football, and
Mm-hmm.
don't you dare tell me that I'm not the fastest, you know, running, because I'm going to show you, be
Competitive.
it man, boy or girl, whatever. I don't know. I just, I didn't really buy into that.
Mm-hmm.
And, um, if I did see that, I would question it a lot, and get very upset, because to me, it seemed very unfair.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So, I don't know.
So he asked officially for your hand, not. So you you got married in the last year. In the last year of.
Yes, yes. So we told our parents, and I think we told them.
You
I
did met
mean,
his parents
we
before,
needed to
right?
get permission, right? So, sorry?
You did met his parents before.
Yes, 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 yes. I had been on holiday to Norway. One of this, like, oh, okay, so when shall I come to Oslo? We weren't even dating, and I was just like, let me discover this, new place. And
It's so
yeah.
funny.
And then he had been to Mexico also, because he also likes traveling.
Mm-hmm.
He had done his own sort of adventures. And yeah, and we told our parents, not that, I mean, we didn't give them a lot of time to prepare. I think it was like 4 months, because at the time, I mean, I don't know what the rules are, but to get married in the UK, he's Norwegian British. His dad is British and his mom is Norwegian, and he grew up in Norway. To get As a foreigner, to get married to a British person, you need to ask permission, and you need to submit all this evidence that it's not a
It's not an
scam
interest, yeah.
marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't want to tell our parents until we got the approval, because we thought, okay, what if we tell them and then it doesn't get approved? Like, no, no,
Mm-hmm.
no. Let's just get everything ready, and then we let them know. So we let them know, and that was that. And we got married the same week that our official graduation took place. So my husband's dad, so my father-in-law, is in the hotel business. So he organized the wedding, because I mean, I don't really care about this stuff. I mean, I just wanted, I wanted important
Formally
people to
done.
be there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I just wanted the important people to be there. But I wasn't really into this like huge ceremony, or, dressed in white or blah, blah, blah. No, 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 no. And he organized everything. And I was very happy with that. And yeah, we had a civil ceremony, and that was it.
With the intention to stay in London, to stay in UK further?
I'm not sure. No, but that point, I think we had both agreed we were going to go to China. So we did. So we finished university, and we enrolled on one of these teach English abroad
ESL.
programs.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we had both enrolled in that. So that was kind of the next thing for us to do after we graduated from university.
Okay, that means directly after university you went abroad again.
Yes.
Okay. And this time you choose the country like a bit more thorough. Was it Singapore directly or was it
No. We went to
it was
China. We
China?
went
Ah,
to
you went to
mainland
China.
China.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh
So
my
we went
God,
to.
Fatima. Oh my God. I didn't know I was for this adventure in I didn't know.
Yeah, so we went to China. We went to Shandong province. This was
Mhm.
in 2007. No, 2007? Yes, because the Olympics were 2008. So it was a year before the Olympics.
Mhm.
We went to Shandong province. We went to a university. It's called Shandong Kejidashue. I mean, my tones are completely off. But yeah, we arrived in this sort of provincial university. It was on the edge of the countryside, and we were teaching master's students English. So they were about my age. And it was such an amazing experience. I the first I would say the first 4 months were very hard. Um, but then I really started enjoying it, and I realized just, I don't know, how can I say this? I started realizing just how generous Chinese people can be once you get to know them, and once once they let you in, and maybe they are they will always be very polite, but maybe they won't let you in immediately just because there's so many people, and the minute they are born, it's a competition for everything. It's a competition for a spot in the kindergarten. It's a spot in the primary school. It's a competition for, to get on the bus because there's so many people that want to. And I just realized, of course, you need to kind of like, put some blinders on because otherwise you go crazy, right?
True.
But once they let you in, I realized that they were so selfless and so generous with their time, with their knowledge, with everything, and I really loved that. Yeah, that was
You
amazing.
were in an area of China that didn't spoke much English, right?
No. They didn't, and I mean, I think, and I didn't speak Chinese, but I pretended. And I think they appreciated the effort. And I would just, pull out everything from my, um, everything from my repertoire of make yourself understood, sign language, miming. And I think, again, being in a place where nobody knows you, you don't care if you look ridiculous or not. Or, there's this element of uh freedom to just maybe do things you would not do elsewhere. And one of the funny stories I have about that was that there was a bus that would depart from the university, I think once every hour. And this bus, I mean, I don't know how it kept going. I think it was inertia. But then when you got to a hill, it struggled. And you probably could walk faster than that bus would go up that little hill. And it took about an hour to get to the city because we were really out. So sometimes you would get a taxi, and this taxi was probably a man who just had a car, and they would take you around. So after a while, I would go with a regular driver, and we would speak in Mandarin. I don't know how, but it turned out that he was a huge fan of Mexican soap operas. And he started telling me about, this huge soap opera called Yesenia, which I think was a massive thing in the 80s or something like that. And I was like, how is it possible? How surreal is this? That I am
What are the
here.
chances?
Yes,
what
yes,
are
yes.
the chances?
But I think it was one of Mexico's greatest exports because you go
Absolutely.
anywhere in the world.
Absolutely. So look, I woke up today in the morning. I knew we had the recording. In my head was a song, Cambio Dolor, Felicidad. You know, I don't know if you know it, but
No, because okay, in Mexico, yes, people would watch
but not
soap operas up until I think my mom's generation, and afterwards it started becoming a bit like, you don't do that. But
you have no idea. So we had during my upbringing, there were 2 TV stations in Romania broadcasting nothing else except telenovelas. Nothing else. It was a phenomenon.
Yeah. And they were completely legit because they were, fantastical, aspirational.
Yeah.
They were very clean. The bad were pantomime bad, and the good were,
Desgraciada.
Desgraciada. The eyes. It was all about the eyes and the looks, like, all
and
this
music.
the music. Yes. I mean,
they created huge stars that are surviving also now. So I mean, if we talk about Talia, if we talk about Natalia Oreiro, if we talk about, I don't know,
even before that, Veronica Castro,
exactly.
and all this, kind of like the golden age of the telenovela stars, and they are laughing all the way to the bank. I mean,
absolutely. I think it was I don't know, and here you have to correct me because I don't know for sure, but there was this famous band which was called, it was this famous soap opera which was called Rebelde.
Oh.
And they made out of it this band which was called RBD.
Yeah.
After they were not that famous anymore, they went for a concert in Romania. Oh my god. It was
phenomenon. Yes,
absolutely.
Yes.
Sorry for moving out, but
we digress.
To meet a taxi driver in China,
in rural China, who was into telenovelas, and I was like, okay, that's all I need to know about you, and that's all you need to know about me. The minute I said Mexico, Mexico. And I don't know what else he said. And then he said, Yesenia. And I was like, of course, Yesenia. And we both started to laugh. And then, we were best buddies after that.
Oh, my God. How long were you in China?
So I was there about a year.
Mm-hmm.
I was there about a year. And yeah, I loved it. We went to Shanghai because I had some of the friends I had met at university that had been doing the remedial course, they were now back in China, so we met there. And yeah, it was wonderful. I loved it. Yeah, it was great. And then we went back to London. After that year, and my husband went on to do a master's, and I was, twiddling my thumbs. I didn't know what to do. And this, of course, was, we came almost back at 2008 financial crisis.
Ooh.
And it was really hard to get a job. It was really hard. There were loads of layoffs, loads of there was a lot of unemployment. And I think I was from that generation where, at least in the UK, you did a degree and you were almost, the idea was you'll get a job immediately. It's not a problem. It was expected, it was demanded, it was a sense of, I don't know, entitlement that you finish your
Entitlement.
degree and
Oh
you
my
get a
God.
job.
Nice. Yeah.
And that came crushing down for me. So I did what I had done in the past, which was, when I was at university, I had worked in sales in clothes shops. So I thought, okay, well, I guess that's what I have to do. I have to, put on a suit, print my CV, and just go to all the different shops and hand out my CV. And I was called back by one shop who had a maternity cover. And
It was that bad.
yes, and it turned out that I knew everything about this, about the product in this shop, because in China I had made myself very well acquainted with fakes. Particularly the fakes of this company. And, I had, seen, it was jewelry. So I had seen the fakes of this jewelry company and I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. And the design, it's so innovative. And then I had researched it. And so I knew everything about the product and they were very impressed. What they didn't know was that I had hands-on experience from my year of trawling the markets in China. And so I started working there, and yeah, I stayed there for about 5 years, sales, and then I started doing marketing and organizing events for them, and yeah, it kind of progressed.
Was it the job that you wanted to do? Or you
No.
just went with the flow?
Yes. Yes, I mean, I guess there was an element of frustration, and maybe this is where, there's a bit of cultural baggage that I carried, in the sense that maybe in the UK you do a degree and then you go into sales and it's no big deal. But for me, I think I saw it as a bit of a failure, because in Mexico, as a university degree, you don't go and work in a shop. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but you're expected to do much more.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit frustrating, but at the same time, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And maybe all those job applications that I had been doing, I didn't get called back. Yeah, maybe because there was a financial crisis, or maybe because I was very unsuited to do that. So, it took me a while to get over my whatever associations I had, and I realized, okay, this is a job as good as any, and actually I'm learning a lot, and jewelry and gemstones and all that is something that I've always loved. And instead of being frustrated because this is what I'm doing, just within what you're doing, see if there's more you can do. And that's how I started to sort of progress within. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun. It was again a very international team.
Lo-
Danish,
London.
Italian, Russian, Bulgarian, um, and yeah, oh, Malaysian as well. And yeah, we had a great time. It was a good team, and I really enjoyed what I was doing.
So
Uh,
you went up the corporate ladder.
yeah, within reason, because
Yeah.
yeah, within reason. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Then I got a bit bored, so I left and I did a yoga training course. But within that, I mean, we also, within the group, I started a film club. I was fundraising for UNICEF. I started to realize that, you can have your job and you can have a side hustle, or you can do,
Mm-hmm.
extra things.
Mm-hmm.
So together with a team at work, we organized a big event to fundraise for UNICEF, and that was so much fun. Then I started a film club because I loved film and I loved independent film, and this was before Netflix. And I found a partner who helped me set up the film club, and we had a lot of fun. But after a bit, I got a little bit tired. I needed a break. So I did this yoga training course. I went back to London and I started doing consultancy work. And then after a year, I went back to my old job.
Okay. That's I'm still looking for Singapore to come in discussion, but
Yeah,
I
so
I don't
Singapore
see it
comes.
coming.
It
I don't.
comes
It's so interesting.
after Brexit. So after
Okay.
Brexit,
So you went back to your old job and you stood
to
there and
my old job. And again, I wanted a new challenge. I wanted something new to do.
have you
But I
have you ever seen yourself of staying forever in London?
yes, at the time, definitely. Yes. I mean, I loved London. I would walk to work. I would cycle,
Mm-hmm.
because after a while, it was like, okay, I'm so done with public transport. It's just my own transport, my own two legs. And, I'm so beyond that. And I think, yeah, I guess, since my sporting days, I love to walk, and I love cycling. Really loved cycling. And, if you're a bit bored and you need a bit of an adrenaline high, nothing more than cycling through London. Uh, and I would, my little game was to, be next to a big sports car and be like, I can accelerate faster than you can. And just ridiculous things like that. You might be in a sports car, but you're stuck in traffic and I can
I'm
just
not.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Things like that, I don't know, kept me entertained. Um, so I would walk to work. Sometimes it would take me an hour, but I really enjoyed that extra hour to walk through London. I loved it. And but yeah, I mean, I guess after a while I wanted a challenge at work. It wasn't coming. The company was not big enough. Uh, you know, sometimes it can be, yeah, I mean, sometimes you can have someone with a lot of ideas and it can be a little bit difficult to position them somewhere, right? Because maybe the structure does not allow for it,
Mm-hmm.
or I don't know. And then Netflix Netflix. And then Brexit happened, and then also my film club, I mean, was running its natural course, was coming to an end. My husband was happy at work, but he also wanted a new challenge. And we thought, you know what? Doors seem to be closing in London, and maybe it's time we look abroad. And he asked me, okay, do you mind if I apply for a job abroad? And I said, no, not at all. I mean, just go for it and we'll see what happens. And yeah, it happened.
So he chose Singapore then.
Yes, he did. He did choose Singapore. So on my husband's side, his mom is Norwegian and his dad is English. But his dad was actually born in Malaysia. And his grandfather was born in Singapore.
Okay, so there is a history there.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes so he was somehow connected, or he felt connected to Singapore.
Yeah. So I said, yeah, sure. I didn't know anything about Singapore.
That was my next question. What did you know about Singapore before?
Nothing at all. At that point, I was pregnant. So I had been pregnant before, but I had a miscarriage. And that also, it makes you it puts into perspective a lot of things. I was maybe placing too much emphasis on work above everything else, and the career ladder and professional development, and I realized that, okay, maybe that's not everything in life. We had been married at this point for 10 years. Well, almost 10 years. And I had thought, oh, okay, well, if I want to have a child, maybe this is now the time. And yeah, so I got pregnant, and then almost, a week later, my husband said, yes, we're going to Singapore. And I was like, okay.
Scared?
You know what? I underestimate things so much, or I disassociate, or I just don't think things through. But I didn't realize how hard it would be to move to a completely new country whilst pregnant, and to leave what had been, I mean, I had been working for a long time at that point. And it was that moving to Singapore, pregnant, it was hard. It was very hard. And I mean, if there's a place to do that, it's Singapore, because everything is set up and you don't have to worry about anything. But still, I think mentally it was a huge kind of, I really felt like the rug had been pulled under me. And I really struggled. I struggled with the heat. I struggled with I felt very alone, because obviously I didn't know anyone. For better or worse, I knew London. I could orient myself in London. I was, one of the things I was very proud of was I knew which carriage of the underground I would take that would be closest to the exit that nobody really knew about. Well, not that nobody knows, but there's like little shortcuts that you find in the London Underground, and I knew them. I was very proud of that. Or I could navigate around, the tiny streets in the West End, or East
home.
London, or whatever. Yes.
Was
and
home.
you knew, you have your designated toilet stops, where you can find a good clean toilet and all this kind of stuff. And I really, I felt yeah, I felt like I knew the place and I could orient myself.
Mm-hmm.
And in Singapore, all of a sudden, I couldn't. And I was hot and I was pregnant and I didn't know what was going on. Yeah.
Because your husband had the job, I do guess that you had a company helping you find a place to live and so on in Singapore, right?
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, we were taken care of. You know, we had a yeah, we had a good network in terms of supporting us to move in. We had like
Mm-hmm.
an orientation day in Singapore.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had someone who had been, who was helping us, an estate agent who was helping us look for places. And yeah, we found a great place to live. Um, and then I became a mom. So it was again, you know, like you move country, you leave your job,
Mm-hmm.
you leave everything, and then you become a mom. That was a huge identity crisis
Absolutely.
for me.
And was it um, you said everything is ready in Singapore. That why it was good. What do you mean by everything is set up? Everything is ready.
Mm, anything. I mean, what do you want? You know, mommy groups, lactation consultants, you know, Eastern medicine theory
Mm-hmm.
for pregnant women of, you know, what to eat, what not to eat, massages, supporting the mother as after, you know, birth, before birth. Again, I mean, it's a very privileged position to be in, right? I mean, I think we moved to Singapore and you still had a relatively open market for foreigners. Foreigners were in relatively high number were still coming in. And I mean, as long as you could, I guess, afford it to an extent,
Mm-hmm.
you could, you know, you had access to a lot of services that would have been impossible
Mm-hmm.
elsewhere, or would have been very difficult to have access to. So, but even so, I started, you know, we arrive and we're in a temporary accommodation, and I thought, okay, well, what do I do? And I started researching, and I found there was a yoga studio close by, and I went to this yoga studio. They have like pregnancy yoga, and I mean, what else do I do? It's super hot. I'm pregnant. I'm not used to this heat. I don't know anyone. My husband goes to work all day. Okay. And for the first time, I was actually afraid to explore around. Maybe because I was
Because of
pregnant.
pregnant. Yeah, because of relationship safety.
I
Yeah.
think you start becoming a little bit more, I don't know,
Aware.
um,
Yeah.
aware, but also, you know, I had lost the first the first
Mm-hmm.
pregnancy, the
Also,
first
yeah.
child. So I was a lot more, I wasn't willing to experiment as
Mm.
much.
Y-
Or,
You said
yeah.
in the post that you hated Singapore in the first year.
Yes, I
What
hated it.
was what was the unique turning point that switched it from hating it to loving it?
I think one thing is probably I probably became very depressed during my last months of pregnancy, and then definitely I had postpartum depression. So that made it very difficult. I had a very difficult delivery for, you know, again, different reasons. Some of them were, you know, I lost the first child and it was going to be all medicalized. So I said, okay, I'm going to the other extreme, which is I'm giving birth in a
In the
water
forest.
tub. Yeah, almost,
I'm sorry for the joke, but I
Yes,
know what
yes,
you
yes,
meant.
in the forest, and the spirit of Mother Earth will
Exactly.
just,
Yeah.
support me. And I ended up with like a, emergency C-section at 42 weeks pregnant, after being induced and blah, 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 blah. So it went completely the opposite way. So that in itself had been, it was a massive kind of trauma for me. And then from there on, yeah, I think, yeah, I definitely had postpartum depression. And I started idolizing London and thinking, I wouldn't be so hot. I wouldn't be this. London, I could just walk out with a child and, at least I would have friends. And even though, these yoga teachers I mentioned, they were the first people I met, they were so nice to me and they were my first friends and genuinely caring and so supportive of me. I don't know. I couldn't see that. I was just romanticizing London. And then I went back to London and I realized, oh my God, no, London with a small baby is not a place to be. The underground, so many underground stations don't have a lift. And if you have a pram, and I was one of those horrible women that would rush in the morning to work and would see a woman like blocking the stairs with her pram, and I'd be like, oh, oh, oh. And now I was like, how could I have done that? And toilets, there's no toilets around, there's like, yeah, different designated stops, but some of them don't have changing stations for kids. In Singapore, you had the changing station, the breastfeeding room, the hot water in case you needed to prepare formula. Most of the MRT stations have a lift, and if they don't have a lift, people are so helpful and so accommodating and just so polite in Singapore. At least, again, that was my experience. Yes, I mean, yeah. The lactation consultant that I had who supported me with my breastfeeding journey. Then, I had a doula who's like they support is a woman who supports you during the birth and then afterwards, because you don't
It's
know how to be a
how's
mom.
there is this service also in
It's not a
Germany.
midwife. Yeah, it's like a midwife, but they call them doulas because there's midwives.
Yeah.
But there's also this woman who, I think the term means something like slave, because they really do everything for you. They help you, and from massage to
And it's also
helping you.
government paid?
No, no,
Oh,
no,
okay.
no, no, no,
Okay.
no, absolutely not.
Okay.
No, no. But then you do have this. For example, this goes into Eastern medical theory. You have this confinement nannies, or who can be doulas or not doulas, and there's a lot of mix of again, Singapore is a melting pot, but you have the Western medical establishment, and then you have a very strong Eastern medicinal approach, traditional approaches, Indian, Ayurvedic approach. So you have these ladies called confinement nannies who are with you for the first 28 days. I mean, they can be with you for, say, 2 weeks, a week, whatever. You pay for the service, obviously, but they are there to help you with the baby as you settle in, but they also cook for you the food that you need to eat to replenish your energy and your whatever whatever traditional approach you want to have.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something that, I mean, I didn't have parents, I didn't have family, I didn't have anything. It was my husband and I. I was like, okay, yes, I'm not going to be here alone talking to a plant and to a baby. I need help. And, you know, we hired this nanny and they make teas for you. So your blood energy increases and you produce milk and, you don't get so many wrinkles or whatever. And so in that sense, they really, and then, you should not be cold. You should not drink cold water and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, yeah, okay, bring it on. I'm going to be pampered. I'm going to let you pamper me and, be taken care of.
You know the advice in Germany for that they told my wife when they said she had a problem at the beginning to start the lactation when my kid was born, and the advice from the doctor was take a beer, and it helped.
Yes, I'm sure it helped.
And I said
I'm
cheap
sure it
tea
helped.
and stuff, and no, take a beer. It's
Yeah, I mean, they might give you some liquor, but they make some different teas, and
mm-hmm.
they have all these kind of approaches. So, in that sense, there are a lot of services that obviously you pay for.
Mm-hmm.
And in Singapore, as a foreigner, nothing is government given. I
Okay.
mean, forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to Singapore, you need to have a very good insurance that, pays for everything, because Singapore is not doesn't have freeloaders.
I forgot to ask you one thing before, Fatima.
Mm.
How is as a European citizen, was your husband directly allowed to work there, or he need a working visa?
Yeah, so it's a lengthy process and you need to apply for an employment pass. It's called an
Okay.
EP, and it's given to the husband. The
Okay.
wife has something called a DP, which is a dependent pass.
Mm-hmm.
And in the past, this dependent pass allowed you also to work. But since we arrived in 2017, that was not the case anymore. So wives did not have the automatic right to employment. So the husband is the one who has employment pass, and he's in a way sponsoring the wife, who's really a
Mm-hmm.
dependent
Mm-hmm.
or trailing
Mm-hmm.
spouse. So not allowed to work.
Mm-hmm. Understood.
Um, and yeah, you need to have a comprehensive insurance that would pay for absolutely everything, because there's no freeloaders. The child does not get citizenship or absolutely anything, even though they are born in Singapore. And yeah.
You There was the situation with the first kid. On the second kid, you mentioned that it was COVID as you were pregnant with the second kid.
No, so she was born in October 2019.
Okay, so
I was
before.
very lucky. So
Okay.
just before COVID. And then ramblings of COVID started in January to 2020
In
already in
January already.
Singapore. Yeah. Yeah, because, there were the cases in China. Yeah, I remember it as, the second half of January 2020, we started hearing about this case, and, there's this case in China, and there's this flu and respiratory disease. Yes, no. Singapore had experience with what was it, avian flu or
Mm-hmm. Avian,
HS?
yeah, H5N1.
Yeah, H5N1 before,
Mm-hmm.
which had been deadly and there had been deaths from
Oh,
it. So
okay.
the government had that experience and they had learned from it. So they had been preparing for another kind of black swan event, which meant that immediately they had contingency plans and they knew what to do. So It was scary in the beginning, but it was also, I mean, the prime minister was very transparent, and they would give, they would address the nation, and wearing a mask is nothing new in East Asia. Immediately the moment you have a cold, you put on a mask, not so much for yourself, but out of respect for others, because you're in a public space and you don't want to be spreading your germs. So it's kind of seen as out of respect for others. You're not kind of, sharing your germs. So, mask wearing was nothing controversial. I would say there's this term in Singapore called kiasu, which has different meanings, but one of them is, they don't want to be the last one, but there's also this kind of fear of death, and they can be very, very careful. So, okay, if there's a danger of exposure, you will just wear the mask, no big deal, and people would just wear a mask. They're very clean, everything's very sanitized to begin with. You find sanitizers everywhere. Everything is kept extremely clean. The playgrounds, the MRT, the MRT is a metro. You cannot eat or drink in the MRT, and except water, and that just keeps it impeccable for everyone. So they just kind of upped it a little bit. Then you had contact tracing. We did have a lockdown. We had 2 lockdowns. 2 weeks, I think, was the first one, and then the second one, I think, was another 2 weeks, and then slowly they started to open. But I mean, after the initial fear that you got at something so unknown, I felt very reassured, and I knew that the government had my best interests and the best interests of their population at hand. And it never became a political game. The opposition and the government in the party in power got together, and it was, let's just do our best for our citizens. And it turned out that they had stockpiled medication, so there was never this fear of medications. There was, like everywhere in the world, people started to stock up on toilet paper. And yes, there was maybe a shortage of toilet paper for a while, but
because that's the most important.
Yes, of course.
It's...
And then, those of us who started to stockpile, because I was one of them.
Me too.
On toilet paper, we started to feel really guilty because we had deprived our fellow citizens of toilet paper. So we just went around the condo, like, distributing toilet paper.
You're writing something. You have written something in the post that one of your kids got COVID.
Yeah.
And you were impressed by the doctor who was on call 24/7.
Yes. So the whole family got COVID.
Okay.
And
it was pre-vaccination.
Post-vaccination.
Post-vaccination, okay.
Yeah, post-vaccination. Yes or no? I don't remember now. Pre or post? I don't remember. My kids were too young to be vaccinated at that time. So we got our shots, and it was like, if you don't want to get vaccinated, you can leave the country. Thank you very much. You need to show proof of vaccination, and this is when you have this is the place you need to go to get vaccinated, and these are the available times. Select your slot, and so smooth, so just a beauty. I'm just so impressed by their logistics, and how quickly they set up the system. and you would arrive to, say, a football stadium or to a basketball stadium, gym, school gym, and they would have the booths, and you would scan, and they would check it's you, blah blah blah. You go, you get vaccinated, and yeah, that's it. We got COVID, and at that point, there was contact tracing, and you needed to report if you got COVID. So the government also distributed for free face masks and COVID tests. So you would get on your post box, you would get COVID tests for free. And they would replenish them every 6 months. So we did the tests and we were all positive. So we said, okay, we have, all the adults are sick, and also we have kids under 3 years old who are also sick, or at 3 or 4 years old. Anyway, so yeah, we had small kids who were under 3, or under 4, with COVID, and they immediately put 2 doctors on call on WhatsApp for the kids, and these doctors would call us. They immediately called me and said, "This is your assigned doctor for your smaller child, and this is your assigned doctor for your older child. How are the kids doing? How is their fever? Has the fever, has it gone down? Is it up? Can you please monitor it? What to do? You apply, wash clothes, cold compresses, blah, 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 the basic stuff. But also, okay, if it goes above this, you can go, this is the hospital you can go to, or this is when you need to give them medication. This is how long it should last. If you notice any of the following, you need to go to a health service. It was amazing. It was amazing, for free. This was absolutely for free for everyone. Because in this case, I guess the logic is you don't want to differentiate. If I get sick and I am a different skin color and nationality than you, it doesn't matter, because my bacteria will hit your local person the same way. It makes no distinction. So in that case, yeah.
And at the end, it would not be fair to say, okay, if you are poor, you have to die. Because let's be honest.
But not even if you're poor, if you're just a different skin color, or you're a different nationality,
exactly.
or you're a different... Yeah. Everything was the same for everyone.
But the fact that you had doctors, like 2 doctors, and the age difference between your kids is not that big, right?
It's 2 years, yeah.
So they could have said, okay, you have one person that is your contact person, but you decided to assign 2 because they knew that most probably the symptoms were different in the age groups. Crazy. Yeah. That's impressive.
I was so impressed. I was, and immediately, work from home started again relatively smoothly and continued for a while. And then, businesses reopened. Again, very fast. People being very cautious did not go out that much, so they relied a lot on delivery services. I wasn't that scared. I would just wear my mask. It would suck because the heat and the humidity, it was just horrible. But you would go out, you would do your contact tracing, you would do whatever you needed to do, and then you would go home. And then things started to relax. You could still work from home. Maybe you needed to keep a distance. Then you didn't really need to keep a distance, but the country stayed closed for almost 2 years. Yeah. Closed in the sense that in the beginning...
It was hard to go in, like Australia.
Yeah, it was hard to, and if you did need to, you could go out, but to come in the beginning, it would be a quarantine. But after a while, you had to pay for your quarantine.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay, that means not so many people are coming anymore.
No, not so many people were coming. And if you were a foreigner and you wanted to go out, can you imagine?
Thinking twice.
Yes, I mean, quarantine with 2 kids in a hotel room. You can't leave for 2 weeks.
First of all, that, and then the second you have to pay for it.
And then you need to pay for it. You need to pay for it.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
So all of a sudden, everything, Singapore became a little bit of a bubble. And you couldn't go out, and people could not come in. Some people were stuck abroad, which was horrible. There were also cases of Malaysians. There's Malaysians who work in Singapore and then they go back to Malaysia, which is just across the causeway, and they live there. And they were stuck in Singapore and they couldn't see their families for about more than a year. Moms with 3-month-old babies that didn't meet them until the kid was 2 years old.
The crazy thing about those times is that you had a lot of social context missing, and like in this case, when you said people were apart from their families and they were not able to see themselves for weeks, there were crazy times.
Yeah, and then there was, I guess, an element of discrimination because it got to a point where you could maybe go out and see your family, but you needed to do a quarantine in the country you were going to go to, pay for it, see your family, and then come back to Singapore and do a quarantine and pay for it. So
nobody can afford that. Come on. It's time-wise.
Time-wise to begin with, time-wise, good luck if you get the permission for that.
Exactly.
But so, for example, my hairdresser had a baby, at almost around the same time as I had. And after 3 months, she had come back to Singapore to work, and the baby was with her family. And she did not see the baby again until the baby was about 2 years.
Sad.
So there were a lot of heartbreaking stories.
This is so sad.
A lot of heartbreaking stories, a lot of sad stories. And I guess we were very privileged in the sense that we were all together and we didn't have this need. But there were also people who lost family members and they couldn't go to funerals and they couldn't go to they couldn't see their family.
They couldn't see their family,
So again, I'm just giving you my very lucky in a way experience. We had a friend whose daughter was living with her grandparents in Malaysia, and COVID started and what's going to happen, what's not going to happen. And he said, you know what? They're going to close the border. And he got on the car, drove to Malaysia, got her daughter, drove back. And I think 2 days later, they closed the border. So, I know I'm speaking from a privileged position, but
it's your own experience that you can speak from. So for sure, and that's the most important at the end.
But for me, COVID was a very relaxing time. My husband was working from home. You couldn't really leave your home. So we were together, and then in the afternoon, all the parents around 5:30, we would all come out, get together in the playground, and the kids would play, and we met our neighbors. And we started getting to know each other, and we became very close. And then, we had this with one of my neighbors with whom we became very close. We developed this walk called Insanity walk. So we would walk around the sort of the perimeter of the apartments where we lived. And it was a way to stay in sanity. And I mean, you started to talk to
Yeah.
people, and I know in a way it isolated you, and you started relying more on social platforms. But I also found it a time where a lot of people relaxed, particularly if they had very travel intensive jobs.
Spend more times with the family.
Yeah.
And they increased the connection to the local community because
Yes.
that was the only community that you could interact with.
Yes.
So I think
yes.
there are also
yes.
some, of course, besides the huge amount of negatives, there are some small positives as well. I can
Yep.
say, I'm still saying that even though we had let's say we had some, we have lost some family members.
Yeah.
And but I have to say I spent the most time with my kid. My kid was 1 also, so that was amazing. I got to work from home, and that was amazing. I have to say,
Yeah.
from that point of view, it was really cool.
Yeah.
Fatima, you wrote that you wanted to be a Singaporean.
Yes.
W- how did idea came up? How did what was that thing that born that idea into your head?
Well, I mean, so COVID kind of ends because, I mean, Singapore was still closed, but I started to get bored. And okay, it's great to be a mom and everything, but I need to do something else. I really need. I have more to do. I have more to give. So you can't work easily in Singapore as a dependent. There's a lot of kind of loopholes. So I thought, okay, why don't I register a company? And from there, let's see what happens. So I did that, and through serendipity and connections from my previous life as a career person, I started a consultancy, and I started working with textiles. I had the role as a commercial representative in Southeast Asia for a textile company. So I was working business to business, and just setting up the business was so easy. I mean, in the UK, it's pretty easy as well. Here, it was very easy. And then working with people, I find Singaporeans to be very honest, and they do what they say they're going to do. And I liked how everything, I mean, it has its drawbacks, right? But everything is very black or white. There's very clear answers to everything, and it's either a yes or a no. And some people complain about, oh, you can't chew bubble gum, and you can't. I mean, who gives a shit about bubble gum if you can walk at 3 a.m. in the morning freely, and nobody's gonna, you're safe. Your kids can run around in the neighborhood, and they are safe. And I don't know. I liked that. I liked that there was, that the government would, for the most part, worked. They were working for you, and they were doing their best for you. And I liked the community sense that existed. So for every, for different events, there will be like neighborhood for different calendar dates. There will be community events that are organized, in this case by by your local member of parliament and his constituency. So there's a Mid-Autumn Festival event. There's Chinese New Year. There's Christmas and New Year. There's even a Halloween one. So the whole neighborhood would get together and organize this Halloween trick-or-treat event. The houses would absolutely decorate themselves. Not decorate themselves, what am I saying? People would decorate their houses and they would put so much into it. People would be walking on the street with their kids. The kids could get semi-lost in the crowd and you really wouldn't worry about it. They would play, and if anyone started getting a bit unruly or this is really not on, somebody would step in and put order. So people are proactive in the sense in trying to keep things organized and safe. It works. Sometimes it can be to an extreme, but I like that. I mean, if you have, I don't know, 20 kids in a bouncy castle and a parent offers to be there to, keep an eye, and, you start taking turns with parents and you develop the system of, okay, we all keep an eye on our kids, even if we don't know each other. And I don't know, or, kids learn how to wait for their turn on the slide. And I don't know, it might be really square of me, but you learn how to be polite and to respect others and to live in a community. And it's not just you, it's how what you do impacts others. I really liked that. I liked this. Yeah, I mean, all the neighbors, get together and we have an event together, and then the member of parliament will come and he will shake hands, and you can approach them, or let's all get together and have a Chinese New Year celebration. So we will have the dragon dance and the lion dance, and I don't know, it starts creating a sense of we share this. The neighbors, when there was an earthquake, there was an earthquake in Turkey about 3 years ago. I remember starting a donation drive, and all of a sudden I got so many things. My house looked like a warehouse, and I didn't know how to take it to the fire station. And a neighbor that I didn't know and offered to drive me there. And it's perfectly okay because, and maybe somewhere else you'd think, oh my God, what if he's a weirdo and he kidnaps me? Or no, this is what you do. This is, you knock on people's doors. And
was it an expat only neighborhood, or it was a
no,
mix?
No, it was a mixed.
It was a mixed. Okay.
Neighborhood.
So
yes.
It was, for you, it was the mixture of safety and community, right?
Yes, safety, clarity, transparency, community, trust.
Mm-hmm.
I can leave, I mean, the number of times I left my bag hanging from a chair and I forgot my bag. And an hour later, I'd be like, oh my God, my bag. And I would run back and my bag would be there. Or I left my phone in the bus, and the bus driver, because it was a loop that this bus route did, he would come back and have my phone and give it to me. Yeah, I really like that. And maybe it goes back to respect also. People are respectful. And again, maybe I'm talking from my privileged position. I'm sure that, the experience I have as what you see would be very different if I was another skin color, another nationality. I look different. I don't know, but
sure.
for me,
but
yeah.
that's not relevant, because at the end we talk about your experience, and I think that's the most important. But I have to ask you one thing, Fatima. So it sounded like an amazing life. Your husband had a good job. You end up having a good job that you like and you enjoyed. Your kids were happy. Why did you
Mm-hmm.
left?
So, first of all, we tried to become Singaporean. So, once the first step is to apply for permanent residency.
Mm-hmm.
And once you apply to permanent residency, you start getting some of the benefits of living in Singapore. That includes being able to apply to local schools, because as a foreigner, you can apply for your kid to go to a local school, but you are, the last of the
You have no
last of the
priority.
last to be picked. Yeah, you
Yes.
have zero priority, and you may end up in a school that's not good, or
Mm-hmm.
that is completely in the other side of the city state.
Mm-hmm.
Or it just doesn't work for you. So then you go to an international school, and those are private schools, and they're very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And my job came to an end. So my consultancy work came to an end. So my biggest client sort of said, okay, you've done a great job, but this is it.
Mm-hmm.
We're cutting budgets, blah, 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 blah. You're a casualty. We love you, but this is it. And then there was the introduction of this points system. It's called a compass system. And it's akin to the Australian system, where you need to get points. So the ability, you getting a job does not really depend on your employer anymore. So you need to meet the employer's criteria, of course, but you need to meet now a second layer, which is the government's criteria, which means we will assign to you points based on the field you work in, your age, your salary, your nationality, your level of education, blah, 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 blah. So this, in the beginning, applied only to newcomers. So foreign newcomers to Singapore needed to meet this criteria. But then they applied the system to foreigners already living in Singapore. So to renew your employment pass, you need to start meeting this criteria. And each year, the older you get, the more you need to earn. And your points go down and down and down and down and down until, there can be let's say you have a role as a supervisor, and each year your salary needs to go up. There's going to be a moment where it just doesn't make sense for you to be the supervisor of that company, because you're earning more than the CEO.
You're too expensive, yeah.
You're too expensive, right? Or, we don't age backwards. So after a while, you start getting less and less points. So that was kind of if you were already employed. And in my case, it just started becoming more and more difficult. I needed to employ somebody and start paying them a minimum of X. And my consultancy work paid, but it wasn't like the biggest, pay of all. So they start making it more and more difficult. So you need to pay for this person, you need to pay government contributions for this person, you need to employ them for a minimum amount of time, so okay, if you have if you have a small business that allows you to do this, great. Of course, you support the country that has you, and you try to employ everyone. But if you have a small business, it just doesn't work. So it kind of makes it very difficult for really small businesses to survive, which again might not be the priority of the government.
Mm-hmm.
textiles definitely not a priority. um, but yeah, it means that then what do you then what do you do, right? What do you do? And I have a second child going into international school. Very expensive. There's no help. After a while, so we were 4 years on a secondment contract.
Mm-hmm.
But after those 4 years, all the perks
Went away.
and you go on a local contract. So that means we had to pay for our own health insurance.
House.
The house was something we had to pay for since the
Okay.
beginning. So those golden parachutes don't really exist in Singapore anymore, unless, I don't know, you're the CEO of a massive company. But mid-level, no. So all of a sudden, it was, and Singapore is not cheap. I mean, it's not cheap.
Mm-hmm.
There are ways to, get around, and yes, you have public transport, and I mean, like everything, you can budget, but I mean, rents went up with a pandemic. There was,
Everywhere.
Rents started to go up. I mean, some people got rent increases of up to 50%, 80%.
Whoa.
We had a really lovely landlord who, I mean, he just such a really lovely man, and we didn't get that much of a rent increase, but all of a sudden there were increases everywhere. Transportation increased, food increased, everything increased, and salaries were not going up as quickly. And then on top of that, you lose one source of income.
Mm-hmm.
The introduction of this point system, it just started to put a lot of pressure on my husband and I. And we thought, you know what? We have the second one coming up to primary school. We'll need to start paying international fees. I don't have a job. The prospect of me getting a job is tenuous. Let's see if there are alternatives elsewhere. And very quickly, an alternative came in the Middle East, and that's where we are. So it was our choice in the sense that could we have stayed there for longer? For sure. Would it have, we probably would have started going into savings and debt and whatever. Is that what you want to do? How long can we sustain this? And how long can you, when will my company say, like, look, I can't keep increasing your salary, and you're let go, and then you're given 2 weeks to leave the country?
But this point system sounds really like a socialist measure. I have to say, it's a bit towards strong left.
Well, I mean, like Lee Kuan Yew used to say, they're pragmatists, and I think,
are they?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think it's a shame because, like I say in the post, the government seems to be very keen on attracting very wealthy individuals, who, yes, they might bring a lot of money into the country, but I don't think they add to the vibrancy of the place. I mean, you all of a sudden, okay, my sector was textiles. And I would speak to my clients, and these were people who would sell fabric in Chinatown or in, different parts of the city. And they were having an issue with seamstresses. Most of the seamstresses came from Malaysia, and they could not get any more employment passes or work passes for seamstresses, because it's not a field that is considered a priority for the Singaporean government. Okay, so all of a sudden there's no seamstresses. There's really no Singaporeans that want to be seamstresses or tailors. Okay, it's not the end of the world, but you start losing that kind of vibrancy then. Okay, so if there's nobody to make your clothes, you don't know how to sew yourself. Okay, then the fabric shops start to go. And then it all of a sudden starts becoming very cookie cutter, big chains everywhere. You start losing these people who would, we would eat at
Absolutely.
hawker centers, which are the kind of communities sort of.
And the community is gone because if you bring wealthy people in, they don't come there to build a community. Usually, people
No.
who have an extreme wealth, they go into places where they can buy their right to do everything. That's the reason why they are doing it, to avoid taxes and to buy the right to do everything and not respect the community.
Well, or not really to integrate yourself,
Exactly.
because with that level of wealth, you
don't care. You can buy your friends.
You can buy your friends. You keep yourself apart. You want to be part of a certain milieu.
Yeah, I read for not long the book of that whistleblower from Facebook. I don't know if you know the book. It's called Careless People.
Yes,
you know it. Yeah, and you know.
I haven't read it, but
so the most shocking in a negative way from part from that book was that Mark Zuckerberg is always allowed by everyone that he's playing with to win at board games, and he doesn't see it. My 7-year-old can see if I allowed him to win.
Yes. They take offense.
Exactly, and they take offense. But if you are really rich, like, you pretend you don't see it. Side note.
I mean, yes and no, but I mean, you start losing this. I think you start losing certain vibrancy.
Absolutely.
You start losing maybe a group of people that, I don't have the same cultural upbringing, but we have other things in common. We're both working to give our kids a better education. We believe in this. We believe to an extent in meritocracy.
Mm-hmm.
We believe in respecting others, and I don't know, you don't have this sense of entitlement. I don't know. So this is what we started to see. And the government at the moment has really been prioritizing certain sectors, and that's what they say, okay, this is the future, this is what we want to do. And I mean, Singapore, to an extent, is engineered. It has been an engineered society. It's a country that is, 65 years old, 60 years old? I mean, and it was the vision of a single man who thought, I can make this swamp into
a country,
something that the world has never seen before. And people probably went like, okay, you're absolutely insane. And then 50 years later, he proved everyone wrong.
Yeah.
Still, so it was bittersweet. I think there's, you have conscription in Singapore, so all males need to do military service. Will women be allowed to do military service? There's a big debate. Some people say that if you have a male child, your chances of applying for permanent residency increase. Yes, no, you don't know. Have we waited longer and maybe it would have come, because you apply and then you don't know
what's happening. Yeah.
What's happening. And you will, and if you try to find out, they will tell you, you will find out in due course, and we're assessing your application, and you don't know what's happening.
We are just reading your Facebook posts.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Oh my God. Fatima, you had an impressive ride. I have to say, I didn't sign up for the whole ride when we first talked, because I didn't knew all the details. But I have to say, I'm deeply impressed, and I think you're a fabulous human being that never said no to adventure. And this is...
And well, yes, I think, just to sort of close up, I know that we've gone over our time, but I think
we don't
one of the other
have
reasons why I liked Singapore so much was because it was very stable. It was very predictable, and it was very safe, which maybe are things that in my own country are not the case. So, going back to Mexico this summer, I mean, you see that, it's all political division and scoring political points, and the population is just, the least on people's, people in power. That's the least thing on their minds. The streets were full of potholes and dirty, and like, how can people live like this when we're used to, this perfection? And if there's, there was an accident, there was a sinkhole in Singapore a couple of months ago, and the director of the public board of utilities came out to apologize, to say that they were extremely sorry that this sinkhole had occurred. And what? In my hometown, if if your car gets destroyed because there's a pothole, who gives a shit?
Right.
There's killings, there's kidnappings. Kidnappings were things that, I grew up in, even in the 80s when Mexico was relatively safe. There was still this kind of things. People don't trust each other. People are just waiting for the other person to stab you in the back. People don't do what they say they are going to do. And I found in Singapore that you could trust people. Of course, there's going to be backstabbing because, we're humans. But
absolutely.
But to an extent, everyone seems to be working towards a shared goal. If somebody says, I'm going to be there and I'm going to do my job and I'm going to do it this way, for the most part, they do it. The taxi driver, will charge you what's fair. There, of course, again, there's, people who try to be smarter than, than they should everywhere. But it's rare. In most instances, I find people to be very decent and very honest. And it's very safe. And you didn't have, I don't know, I mean, this makes me a bit emotional, but you don't have the uncertainty of, political assassinations, or you don't have like your currency devaluating from one day to another and you lose your savings. Or somebody arrives and, well, they take over your house because what are you going to do about it? So I'm not saying that it's perfect, and I'm sure there's corruption because corruption exists everywhere. But for the most part, I see it as a system that still works for everyone.
Fatima, I think it's absolutely normal what you feel, because we are social animals and we need the community, and we need to trust the people around us, and we need to rely on the people around us. And when we are not able to do that, we suffer, and that's normal. And of course, you are connected, and you are emotionally connected to a place where you could rely on your neighbor, where you could be, where you are not afraid to let your kids on the playground on another neighbor's watch, because you are sure that you are finding them back when you come back.
Yes.
All these things are normal. I do keep bringing this example that I read I think in Michelle Obama's book, when it said that the community was raising the child. And I think this is what we all miss. We all miss this community that works together. And if I see your kids outside and they are doing something bad, I call you and tell you, see, I've seen this. Maybe you can talk to him, but I don't call you to have a fight with you. No, I want to help you. And this is something which is missing in the society, because in the society at the moment, and I can tell you it's ever the same, from my experience at least, we are trying to be to have more money than the other, to have a better car, to have a better phone, to have a better, I don't know, a better, name it, a better kid. Even that we are forcing
Yes,
our kid to be better than the neighbor's kid,
yes.
which is so stupid. So
Stupid,
stupid.
yes.
And I think this is something which is missing, and this is something which is connecting you to Singapore. And I think
Yeah.
it would be, I don't want to disappoint you, but it will be hard to find it somewhere else.
Yes. So in Singapore, they call it the kampong spirit, which is, it translates like a little bit like the community or the neighborhood spirit.
Mhm.
And yes, it's the spirit of, we help each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is something which is hopefully will come back one day. And I think there are gonna be
Yes.
these wake up calls happening in the late years, where countries are bombing each other for 2 pieces of land, which makes absolutely zero sense. Maybe we'll have a wake up call when we realize nobody cares. Nobody cares if on this part of the land is written, I don't know, Singapore or Malaysia or China or whatever it's written. We are all people and we try for this community together. That's it.
Yes, I think that's, a value that, I mean, I didn't. If you had asked me when I lived in London if this was important, I would have told you, duh, no, of course not. Who cares?
Because you are in that world, of running, of being on a rush, of getting things done, climbing the career ladder, doing that and that and that deliverable.
Mm-hmm. But once you realize that actually, you know what, this is really valuable and it's really important, and you realize that there's another way, right? So if I go back home and I, tell, my parents or whoever, but why don't you trust this? Or why don't you give them the benefit of the doubt? Or they'll look at me like I am crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you have experienced a place where actually that is possible, and
it's working.
And yes, it's working. Let's see how long it lasts, because everything changes. Hopefully it won't, but it is possible, and I think that's yeah, I think I'm very lucky to have experienced
absolutely
it. Yes.
Absolutely. I am you. I'm searching for that. I know I have to say I'm a US fanboy, and I always thought that those small communities that exist in the US, those small villages are like this, but from the stories that I heard from my guest, it's just a dream. It's not reality.
I'm sure it exists.
Absolutely.
Somewhere.
I want to finish on a positive note, and I want to have a smile. I usually have 5 rapid fire question, I call them, and it's tailored. They are tailored for the guest. And I have to ask you, best food country: Mexico, Italy, or Singapore?
I don't know.
No.
I don't know.
Okay, that's so you're not a foodie, or you cannot decide.
I'm not a purist. I mean, I take the best of wherever.
Nice.
In Singapore, you have a mix of everything.
Mm-hmm.
You can find everything. Yeah, you can find everything. In Italy, obviously, you have the ingredients, and then you have the simplicity of it,
and the kitchen, yeah.
The simplicity, but really focusing on the ingredients, and on, this simple, beautiful way of making the most out of it. Yeah. And in Mexico, you can have both. You can have the ingredients, because when I was there, oh my God, yes, I mean, from the fish you could get, the fish, the vegetables, the fruits. It was really amazing. But also the way in which you can combine them, right? Mm-hmm. Which, again, it's a mixture of so many things.
Okay. Which?
Sorry.
No, you don't have to say sorry. You don't have to have an answer. Where did you face the biggest culture shock? Was it UK, was it China, or was it Singapore?
Biggest culture shock. I think the biggest culture shock was in the beginning of living in China. So that time I lived in China was one of the biggest culture shocks from the way, people can just disassociate themselves to not deal with the crowds, to the way, losing face might be interpreted. Losing face is like being shamed in front of other people, and the way, people would react. I found that, again, one of the biggest sort of culture shocks. Yeah.
If you could raise your kids only in one of these countries, which one would you choose?
The UK,
No, the
Singapore.
countries that you already lived in.
I think it would probably be Singapore. Having said that, for all the beauty of Singapore, I think it's a beautiful place for children to grow up in because they remain kids for a long, long, long time. So that, in a sense, is preserved and nurtured. But unfortunately, the rest of the world does not work like Singapore. And you do need to develop that streetwise.
Absolutely. I like that. I love that.
That streetwise streak, because otherwise you are just such an easy target for everything.
Absolutely. I call it street smart, but you have to have it. You have to have it.
You need to have it. You definitely need to have it.
Otherwise you're lost. Which of these places felt more like home, Fatima?
Singapore, I think. And again, I mean, I say it from my expat bubble, maybe, but I liked the system. I liked the I liked the system. I liked the way things were set up. I liked, as I said, the transparency, the honesty. Going back to Mexico, I can struggle with, this polarization that you see in many parts of the world. The inequality that is more and more and more.
Missing middle class.
Yes. And I guess maybe I don't know.
Is this your current station, the last station? The final?
No, definitely not. No.
That was a fast no. Fatima, thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
It was a really nice talk. I learned your story. I learned so much about from you. I have to say this freedom that you had in deciding as a kid was impressive for me because this is, you have kids as well, and you know that the only thing that you want them is they to be independent. So everything else, this is at least my feeling. This is what I want from my kid. I want to make him independent, and I see that it's possible, and I see I see that it works out well. So for me, it was a joyful conversation, and thank you for your time.
Well, no, thank you once again for for reading my post and for following up, and now for your time and setting up everything. It's my life. Sometimes you take whatever you do for granted. Like for me, you set up a podcast and you interview people. Oh my God, that's amazing. Where did that come from? Da, da, da. But yeah, thank you for so much for taking an interest. I really I thank you for making it possible.
You had an amazing ride, I have to say, and that's the story. The interest came by itself. Thank you for your time again, and well, I hope that also we can do this again one day when you are in a new station, and maybe to give me your Middle East experience.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
thanks a lot. Talk to you
Thank
next
you
time.
so much. Take up off. Bye
Bye.
bye.